Today, I want to share with you. I was actually a YouTube video I did about the biggest killer of business growth I have seen in all my years, not just in business. I've had 20 companies, I've done hundreds and hundreds of $1 million in sales, but specifically as a coach working with people all over the world. And what I actually see destroy their business. And it's this one thing more than almost anything else. So, I'm going to flip you over to the YouTube video. And this was specifically written for custom home builders, but it is for every single business I've ever seen or been a part of. So let's go to the video. If you are a custom home builder doing 2, 3, even $10 million a year, and life looks pretty good on paper, but doesn't necessarily feel that way, this video might bother you because most builders don't stall because they fail. They stall because they reach a level of comfort that quietly kills their ambition without them even realizing it. And in the next few minutes, I want to show you why that comfort is actually the most dangerous ceiling in this business and how the builders who break past it think just a little bit differently, not tactically, but structurally. And what I want you to understand first is that this problem is it's not unique to construction. I've had 20 different businesses, hundreds of $1 million in sales. I've worked with different business owners all over the world. It's not a market issue. It's not a generational issue. It's not even a business issue. It is a human one. And this exact pattern shows up everywhere humans organize themselves: civilizations, companies, governments, families, individuals. And historians have been documenting this for centuries. I was just reading a book about empires, and empires don't collapse at their weakest point. They collapse after prosperity. They collapse after survival is no longer the primary concern. They collapse when comfort replaces necessity. And in this particular example, it was the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire didn't fall because it was fragile. It fell because it became comfortable. Once expansion was no longer required for survival, standards softened and responsibility fragmented and discipline eroded and growth stopped being necessary. And that's not ancient history. That is just human behavior. And it's the same thing that happens to builders who hit a few $1 million in revenue. And I work with builders all over the country, and I get it. Some of my guys are building $10 million houses, but on average in the United States, that's 4, 6, 8 million bucks. And quietly they decide they've made it. And you survive the early grind, you figure out estimating, you get a few solid clients, you hire just enough people so that you're not drowning every day. Revenue climbs, stress comes down a little, and suddenly life feels manageable. Not easy, but manageable. And that's the moment that growth quietly stops. Not because you can't grow, not because you don't have the skill or the market or the opportunity, but because there's no longer a reason strong enough to justify the discomfort that growth requires. And I think that should be resonating with a lot of you. This is where most people misunderstand motivation. At this stage of business, motivation doesn't work anymore. Podcasts don't work, quotes don't work, even tactics stop working because you're no longer fighting to survive. And the guys I work with, and again, there's 30,000 builders in the United States. I work with 30 or less at any given time. They understand that I'm not a guy. If you're looking for tactics and 6,000 videos and here's a fancy spreadsheet that's going to fix your business, I am not your guy. The reason I went to Brown, the reason I got my ICF as a professional coach was so that I could coach the human being, because ultimately I have found, and this has been true in my life, my experience is that all business problems are people problems. They're human problems. They're typically me problems or you problems. And a lot of that is because why you hit that growth ceiling is because you're no longer fighting to survive. You're fighting inertia. And inertia is dangerous because it sounds reasonable. It sounds like wisdom. It sounds like maturity. It sounds like responsibility. And, why rock the boat? Things are fine. I've earned this. Why create more stress? And man, I get it. Those aren't excuses. They're psychological defense mechanisms that are, we haven't changed as a species in the last 100 years. We've changed as a culture in the last 100 or 200 years. And there's a massive body of research certainly in behavioral psychology, which is most of those books back there, that explains this. And once humans pass a certain threshold of safety and security, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if you want to start getting technical on things, their tolerance for discomfort drops sharply. And it's not because they're weak, but because the perceived return no longer feels worth the cost. And economists call this, I think it's diminishing marginal utility. Nerd words. But in real life, it sounds like, why risk what I already have? Fair question. And that question feels responsible. It feels smart, but it's also the question that quietly ends growth. And it's why success actually makes you more vulnerable than failure ever does. Failure sharpens people, comfort dulls them. I said in my first book, Million Dollar Flip Flops, like beware of comfort is where dreams go to die. And if you know anything about me, I'm a hot rod guy. I've got a bunch of classic cars, almost all Fords. But there's a story about Henry Ford that most people don't hear. And I remember my grandpa telling me this, but it was early in his career. He was obsessed with improvement. He questioned everything. He iterated everything relentlessly. But once the Model T dominated the market, once he won, that obsession faded. He resisted change. He ignored new ideas. He held tightly to what worked. And Ford Motor Company nearly lost its edge, not because of failure, but because of stagnation. Comfort didn't protect him. It made him vulnerable. And this is the part I find that most builders miss. Your why does not stay the same as you grow. Early on, your why is survival. Then it becomes stability. Then it becomes lifestyle. And if it stops there, growth becomes optional. Optional growth always loses to comfort. And history shows us that every leader, every organization, every builder who broke through their comfort ceiling, what I call the structural ceiling in the book, had a why that expanded with that success. Lincoln wasn't fighting for a job. He was fighting for the preservation of a nation. Churchill wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting for civilization itself. Their purpose grew as their position grew. And scale, even in a lowly home building business, scale requires a purpose that outgrows personal benefit. And that's why I still coach. People often ask me on calls, why are you still doing this? And one, I will usually just send them the link to SASLA, the, send a student leader abroad, which usually pops up on that TV back there. I sold my last company in 2022. Like, I don't need to do any of this. I do it because I've seen what happens when people with experience stay silent. I very much believe that people went to the top, they sent the elevator back down for me. It's a lot of the reason I had the success I did so young. I paid a lot of mentors. I had a lot of free mentors. There was just a lot of people with a lot of experience that taught me the right way to do things as I struggled. And I lived the trial and error, the expensive coaches, the failures. I've seen the cost of staying stuck in a structure that technically works, but just slowly steals your time and your presence and your family. And if you're ever on my email list, you'll get this email called Giving Your Wife and Kids the Finger. And, it's not this one. It's this one that says, you're not important right now, son. This lady's tile selection is. And that's a terrible place to live. And it happens slowly. It creeps up on us. It's not an overnight thing. But I know some of you listening to this have had that experience where suddenly you kind of start to lose your marriage. You kind of start to lose your family. You kind of start to lose your health. And it's the component pieces of the things that are in here tactically, but that ultimately are mind and heart centered things. And that's why we built the foundation. Every dollar from what I do, the books, the coaching, everything, 100% of it goes to the foundation. And no, I won't coach forever. If the foundation goes the way it should, I'd love to spend my time working with the kids instead. But until then, helping builders solve multi-million-dollar problems and reclaim their time, their sanity, and their profits and rebuild their families, is leverage, and leverage is how impact actually scales. So what can we do about it? Here is something you can actually use. No tactics, no spreadsheets. Ask yourself this, and don't answer quickly. Think about it. If my business doubled in size, who would benefit besides me? Then ask yourself this. What responsibility keeps tapping me on the shoulder that I keep ignoring? That's not guilt, that's purpose trying to grow. It's a lot of the reason, this is a little bit of a tangent, but it's a lot of the reason in when we talk about the magnet, the method, the machine. And just today I was on one of our older clients, older meaning has been with us a long time. He's doing $30 million a year and still mostly to my chagrin referrals. And I've been through 2008 and 2009. I've watched $20 million businesses shrink to nothing. And it's when the responsibility of, he's got 16 employees now, that's 16 families that count on a paycheck from his business. And if you work solely on referrals, I want for you to tell me, how are you planning next year? You can't. How do I know? How many referrals are you going to have next month? We can go off history because, last year we grew and the year before that we grew and maybe the houses got bigger, but you don't have a predictable pipeline. You don't have predictable sales. All businesses, my business, your business listening to this, it is possible to have predictable sales. Every business on earth has predictable sales, but for some reason, home builders, realtors, actually a lot of entrepreneurial businesses in that realm just expect money to fall from the sky. But when you have a bigger purpose, when you don't just grow from inertia, but you grow from a plan, when the why is big enough, any how is possible. That's when you will start to turn those things into predictable systems and plans. Because I'll be honest, it's a lot of times it's not fun building those things. I get it. But it's the sleep at night factor. It's, I know my business will do X next year, period. I 100% with 100% accuracy know that. World calamity, sure, but that's going to affect all of us, So when a builder reconnects to a why that's bigger than lifestyle, those decisions get cleaner, hiring gets easier, boundaries get more solid, and growth stops feeling reckless and starts feeling required. That's why I still show up. That's why I still make videos like this for people like you. And my final thought here would be, if this stirred something uncomfortable in you, I would offer that that's a good thing, because that's usually where the real progress begins. So I don't want this one to go on forever. My day of calls today kind of led me to think about this. So think about those couple questions. If I can ever help you in any way, reach out, subscribe, watch my other videos, all the other things, smash that like button. God, I hate it when people say that. But I hope you found this valuable, and we'll see you on the next one. Cheers.